They say that the people you love the most have the power to hurt you the worst. I never used to believe that. I used to think that love was a shield, something that protected you from the harsh realities of the world. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. Love isn't a shield. Sometimes, love is just a blindfold. And when someone finally pulls it off, the light doesn't just blind you, it burns. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my entire life crashed down around me. The weather outside was completely normal. It wasn't raining. There was no dramatic thunder. It was just a regular, sunny Tuesday. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, pouring myself a cup of coffee, waiting for my husband, Mark, to come home. We had been married for 7 years. 7 years of building a life together, or so I thought. We had shared dreams, shared struggles, and a shared bank account. We were a team. Then the front door clicked open. Mark walked in, but he didn't look at me. He didn't kiss my forehead like he usually did. He didn't ask how my day was. He just set a single white envelope on the kitchen island and stepped back. He looked distant, almost like a stranger standing in my own home. "What's this?" I asked, my voice light, assuming it was just some boring legal paperwork or a tax form. "It's over, Sarah," he said. His voice was completely flat. "No emotion, no sadness, no anger, just cold." I paused, my coffee mug halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean? What's over?" "Us," he replied, looking past me at the wall. "Our marriage. I'm leaving. The divorce papers are in that envelope. I've already signed them. Everything is taken care of." My heart dropped into my stomach. The room felt like it was spinning. I laughed, a nervous, shaking laugh, waiting for him to tell me it was a terrible joke. "Mark, stop it. That isn't funny. Did something happen at work? Are you stressed?" "I'm serious, Sarah," he said, and for the first time, he looked me dead in the eye. There was absolutely nothing behind his gaze. "No worries, no regret. I don't love you anymore. Honestly, I haven't loved you for a very long time. I've just been waiting for the right moment to leave." The right moment. What did that even mean? Before I could even process the words coming out of his mouth, he grabbed a single suitcase that he had left right outside the front door. He hadn't even packed his clothes in front of me. He had done it secretly, probably while I was out running errands the day before. Everything was planned. Every single detail. "You can keep the house for the next 30 days, he added casually, as if he were a landlord talking to a tenant. "But after that, it's being sold. I've already put it on the market. You need to find somewhere else to live." "Mark, you can't do this," I gasped, tears finally spilling over my eyelids. "We built this life together. I gave up my career to help you start your business. I supported you when you had absolutely nothing. You can't just throw me out like trash." He let out a short, mocking sigh. "Sarah, let's be realistic. The business is in my name. The house is in my name. Legally, you aren't entitled to anything. Check the bank account if you don't believe me. I've already transferred the funds. I'm leaving you enough for a cheap apartment and a few months of groceries. Consider it a parting gift." He turned around, walked out the door, and closed it behind him. The click of the lock echoed through the empty house. I stood there, frozen. My hands were shaking so violently that my coffee spilled over the edge of the mug, burning my fingers, but I didn't even feel it. I rushed to my phone and opened my online banking app. My fingers fumbled over the screen. I logged in, holding my breath, praying that he was just trying to scare me. But when the screen loaded, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Our joint savings account, which just yesterday held over $200,000. Money we had saved up together, money from my inheritance, money from years of hard work, was gone. The balance read exactly $50.
$50.
He hadn't just left me. He had completely wiped me out. He had taken my past, my present, and my future, leaving me with absolutely nothing. He thought he had won. He thought he had left me completely penniless, broken, and defeated. But as I sat on that cold kitchen floor, weeping until my throat was raw, a tiny spark began to form deep inside my chest. He thought he had destroyed me, But he had no idea what I was truly capable of. How does someone you slept next to for 7 years turn into a monster overnight? That was the question that kept me awake for the next 3 days. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's cold, unfeeling expression as he told me our marriage was a lie. But the nightmare was only just beginning. On the 4th day, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered it, my voice hoarse. It was a woman's voice on the other end. She sounded young, confident, and entirely unapologetic. "Sarah?" she asked. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Jessica," she said, and I could practically hear the smug smile through the phone line. "I'm Mark's new assistant. Well, actually, I'm much more than his assistant now. Mark asked me to call you because you left some of your old photo albums in the hallway closet, and we need them cleared out by this weekend. We're moving into our new penthouse, and we don't want your clutter." My jaw went completely slack. Jessica. I knew that name. Mark had hired her 6 months ago to help manage the growing workload at his marketing firm. He had told me she was just a young, hardworking graduate who needed a break. I had even made extra dinner for him to take to the office for her when they were working late nights. "You!" I choked out, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow to the chest. "It was you. The whole time." "Oh, please, Sarah. Don't be dramatic," Jessica scoffed. "Mark was miserable with you. You were holding him back. He's a successful businessman now, and he needs a woman who matches his status. You're just a housewife who got comfortable. He built that company, and he deserves to enjoy his wealth with someone who actually understands it." "He built that company with my money," I shouted, the tears flowing freely now. "My father left me an inheritance, and I gave every single cent of it to Mark so he could buy his first office. I designed his website. I did his accounting for the first 3 years without taking a single dime in salary." "Well, too bad you didn't put your name on the paperwork then," Jessica said coldly. "Legally, it's his. All of it. The company, the money, the assets. It's all Mark's. He worked the system perfectly, Sarah. He spent the last year shifting assets, changing accounts, and making sure that when he finally dropped the papers on you, you wouldn't have a legal leg to stand on. You lose. Just accept it and move on." She hung up the phone. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there in the middle of my empty living room, the words echoing in my mind. He spent the last year shifting assets. He worked the system perfectly. It wasn't an impulse decision. Mark hadn't just fallen out of love with me. This was a calculated, cold-blooded ambush. For 12 whole months, while he was smiling at me across the dinner table, while he was kissing me goodnight, while he was telling me he loved me, he was actively plotting to ruin my life. He was consulting lawyers, hiding money, and setting up a trap to leave me destitute. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but not from sadness anymore. For the first time in 4 days, the tears stopped. The overwhelming grief that had suffocated me was suddenly replaced by something else. A searing, white-hot anger. He thought he was a genius. He thought he was 10 steps ahead of me because he had a degree and a fancy title. But Mark had forgotten one very important thing. I wasn't just a housewife. Before I gave up my career for him, I was a senior data analyst for one of the largest corporate consulting firms in the city. I knew how to read numbers. I knew how to find patterns. And most importantly, I knew exactly how Mark's business operated because I was the one who built its foundation. He wanted to play a game of chess? Fine. But he had no idea that he had just handed the board to a master. The first thing I had to do was secure my survival. With only $50 in my bank account and 30 days to vacate the house, I couldn't afford to sit around and feel sorry for myself. I needed a roof over my head, and I needed an income. I called my oldest and most trusted friend, Elena. We had drifted apart over the last few years because Mark always complained that Elena was a bad influence, which really just meant she saw right through his arrogant facade. When I called her and explained what happened, she didn't even let me finish. "Pack your bags right now. You're staying with me," Elena said firmly. "We will figure this out together." Moving out of the house I had spent 7 years decorating was agonizing. I had to leave behind memories, furniture, and the life I thought I was going to grow old in. I packed everything I could fit into my small car. When I drove away from that house for the last time, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I looked straight ahead. Elena's apartment was small, but it was safe. The first night there, we sat on her living room floor surrounded by my cardboard boxes. "So, what's the legal plan?" Elena asked, handing me a cup of tea. "You're going to sue him for half the business, right? You put your own inheritance into it." "I talked to a legal aid lawyer yesterday," I said, my voice tight. "Mark was clever, Elena, really clever. Because my inheritance was deposited directly into our joint account, it became a marital asset. And because he used that money to fund a corporation that is strictly registered under his name alone, and because I voluntarily stopped working there to let him run it, the law sees it as his business. The lawyer told me that fighting this in court could take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Money I don't have. Mark has a high-priced team of corporate attorneys. They would drag it out until I was completely bankrupt." Elena slammed her mug onto the table. "So he just gets away with it? He gets to steal your life savings, run off with his assistant, and leave you with nothing?" "No," I said quietly, looking down at the glowing screen of my laptop. "He doesn't get away with it. The courts might not be able to help me right now, but that doesn't mean he's safe. Mark thinks he's a criminal mastermind, but he's actually incredibly arrogant. And arrogant people always make mistakes." I opened a spreadsheet on my computer. It was a local backup of the company's financial structure from 3 years ago, back when I was still managing the books. "What are you looking at?" Elena asked, leaning in. "Mark's business, Apex Marketing, relies entirely on 3 major clients," I explained, pointing at the data. "These 3 corporations make up 80% of his revenue. If he loses even one of them, his company will start to bleed. If he loses 2, he won't be able to pay his staff or his rent. And if he loses all 3, the entire empire collapses." "But how are you going to take his clients away?" Elena asked, frowning. "You don't have a marketing firm." "Not yet," I murmured, a slow smile creeping onto my face for the first time in a week. "But I'm about to start one." Mark forgot that the clients didn't sign up with Apex because of him. They signed up because of the data-driven strategy models that I created. Models that he still uses today. He thinks he left me penniless. He thinks I'm weak. He's going to be so busy celebrating his victory that he won't even see me coming. Revenge isn't something you rush. If you strike too early, you give your enemy a chance to defend themselves. You have to wait, watch, plan, and build your strength until victory is absolute. For the next 3 months, I lived on Elena's couch and worked 18 hours a day. I used the tiny bit of money I had left, along with a small personal loan Elena insisted on giving me, to officially register a new company, Vanguard Analytics and Strategy. I didn't rent a fancy office. I didn't hire a flashy assistant like Jessica. I worked from a cramped desk in the corner of Elena's living room, living off coffee and pure determination. My goal wasn't just to compete with Mark. My goal was to completely replace him. I started by looking into his 3 primary clients. The largest one was a massive national retail chain called Omnicorp. They alone accounted for nearly 45% of Mark's business income. I knew from my past work with them that their primary focus was efficiency and cutting-edge data analysis. They didn't care about flashy presentations or expensive dinners. They cared about results. Through my connections in the industry, I found out that Omnicorp's contract with Mark's firm was up for renewal in exactly 2 months. Usually, renewals were just a formality. Mark would take their executive team out to a luxury golf resort, show them some basic charts, and they would sign the line for another year. But this year was going to be different. I spent weeks digging through publicly available data regarding Omnicorp's recent market performance. Because I understood Mark's specific strategies inside and out, I could see exactly where his methods were failing them. He was using outdated algorithms. He was overcharging them for basic automated services, and his campaign numbers were starting to plateau. He was getting lazy because he thought he was untouchable. I compiled a comprehensive 80-page alternative marketing and data strategy report. It was flawless. It showed exactly how Vanguard Analytics could increase their digital conversion rate by 30% while reducing their monthly retainer fee by 15%. I wasn't doing this for a massive profit initially. I was doing this to take away his oxygen. Once the report was ready, I didn't send it to the general info email inbox where it would be ignored. I reached out directly to Arthur Vance, the Chief Marketing Officer of Omnicorp. Years ago, when Mark was first trying to secure Omnicorp, Arthur had been incredibly impressed by my analytical breakdowns during the initial pitch. Mark had taken the credit, of course, but Arthur wasn't a fool. He knew who did the actual math. I sent Arthur a brief, professional message from my new corporate email address. Arthur, I hope you're doing well. I have recently launched Vanguard Analytics, and I've been reviewing Omnicorp's recent market performance. I've noticed several significant inefficiencies in your current digital campaigns that are costing you millions in lost conversions. I have put together a completely restructured strategy that guarantees a 30% increase in performance. I'd love 15 minutes of your time to present it before you finalize your upcoming agency renewals. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was an email invitation for a virtual meeting the following Monday. The first brick in my foundation was laid. Mark had no idea that while he was spending my inheritance on luxury apartments and sports cars to impress his new girlfriend, the ground beneath his feet was already starting to crack. The day of the presentation arrived. I wore a sharp, professional blazer that I had bought from a thrift store, making sure I looked every bit the corporate executive I used to be. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but as soon as the video call connected and Arthur Vance's face appeared on the screen, a wave of absolute calm washed over me. "Sarah," Arthur said, offering a polite nod. "It's been a while. I was surprised to hear you left Apex. Mark told us you had retired from the industry to focus on personal matters." My blood boiled slightly at the lie, but I kept my composure perfectly. I smiled warmly. "Mark was misinformed, Arthur. I simply decided it was time to step out of the shadows and launch a firm that focuses entirely on data precision. I believe Apex has shifted its focus toward lifestyle brand management, whereas my focus remains strictly on your bottom line." "Well, I have to admit your email caught my attention," Arthur said, leaning back in his chair. "Our numbers with Apex have been a bit stagnant lately. Let's see what you've got." I shared my screen and began the presentation. For the next 20 minutes, I didn't just present a pitch. I delivered a masterclass. I laid bare every single flaw in Mark's current strategy. I showed Arthur exactly where Apex was wasting his budget, how their targeting metrics were completely outdated, and how Vanguard could streamline the entire operation. As I spoke, I watched Arthur's expression change from polite curiosity to intense concentration. He started taking notes. He called in 2 of his top directors to join the meeting midway through. By the end of the presentation, the room was completely silent. "Sarah," Arthur said after a long pause, "this is incredibly thorough. Honestly, this makes the quarterly report we received from Mark last week look like high school homework. But changing agencies is a massive operational risk for us. We've been with Apex for 5 years. "I understand the risk, Arthur," I replied confidently, "which is why I'm offering you a 90-day, performance-based trial period. If Vanguard does not hit the exact milestones outlined on page 45 of this report within the first 3 months, you can terminate the contract with 0 penalties and return to Apex. But if we do hit them, you sign a 3-year exclusive contract with us." Arthur exchanged glances with his directors on the call. He turned back to the camera, a sharp smile appearing on his face. "You always were the brains of that operation, weren't you, Sarah? Mark is a great talker, but you're the engineer. Deal. I'll have our legal team send over the trial contract by tomorrow morning." When the call ended, I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let out a long, shaky breath. 2 days later, the contract was signed. Omnicorp officially served Apex Marketing with a 30-day notice of non-renewal, citing an internal restructure. I wished I could have been a fly on the wall in Mark's office when he received that notice. Omnicorp represented nearly half of his entire business income. It was the account that paid for his fancy office, his staff salaries, and his luxury lifestyle. With one single, precise strike, I had sliced his company's revenue directly in half. And the best part? He had absolutely no idea it was me who did it. He just thought he was experiencing a stroke of bad luck. But luck had nothing to do with this. This was execution. A week after losing Omnicorp, my phone rang at midnight. I looked at the screen. It was Mark. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. He called back immediately, and then a third time. Clearly, the panic was starting to set in. On the fourth attempt, I finally answered. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice completely flat, mirroring the exact tone he had used with me on that fateful Tuesday afternoon. "Sarah, finally!" He barked into the phone. He sounded incredibly stressed. The arrogant, untouchable tone was entirely gone. "Did you know about this? Did you have something to do with Omnicorp pulling their account?" I let out a soft, amused chuckle. "Why would I know anything about your business, Mark? You made it very clear that it's your company, remember? Legally, I'm not entitled to anything, so why would I care?" "Don't play dumb with me, Sarah," he shouted, his voice cracking with anxiety. "Arthur Vance won't take my calls. His secretary told me they signed with some new boutique firm called Vanguard Analytics. I looked up the corporate registration, and the parent company is listed under a blind trust. Is that you? Are you trying to ruin me?" "I don't need to ruin you, Mark. You're doing a perfectly fine job of that all by yourself," I said calmly. "Maybe if you spent less time hiding marital assets and more time updating your outdated marketing models, your clients wouldn't be leaving you." "Listen to me, you ungrateful little," he snarled, catching himself before he finished the insult. He took a deep breath, trying to change his tactic. "Sarah, look, let's be reasonable. We were together for 7 years. If you're angry about the divorce, we can talk about it. I can give you a bit more money. I can transfer another $20,000 to your account right now. Just call Arthur. Tell him to come back to Apex. You know him, he respects you. If my company goes under, everyone loses."
$22,000.
I asked, a cold smile spreading across my lips. "You stole over $200,000 of my life savings, threw me out of my own home, left me with $50 in my account, and now you're offering me $20,000 as a favor? You really are pathetic, Mark. Sarah, please, I have a massive payroll to meet next month. The rent on the penthouse is $10,000 a month. If I don't replace the Omnicorp revenue, I'm going to have to lay off half my staff. Then I suggest you start rewriting your resume," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Mark." I hung up the phone and blocked his number. Sitting on the couch, I felt a massive wave of vindication wash over me. He was panicking. He was starting to feel the exact same suffocating anxiety that I felt when he left me penniless. He was realizing that his wealth, his status, and his power were nothing more than an illusion. He thought he was the king, but he was just a puppet who didn't realize who was pulling the strings. But I wasn't done yet. Slicing his business in half wasn't enough. I wanted to make sure he could never do this to anyone else ever again. It was time for the second strike. Mark's remaining 2 major clients were Apex Logistics and Greenfield Organics. Together, they made up the remaining 40% of his business. Now that he was desperate and bleeding cash, he would be clinging to these 2 accounts like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood. I knew exactly how he would handle them. He would try to overcharge them or speed up their billing cycles to cover the massive deficit left by Omnicorp. It was a classic, desperate corporate move. And just as I predicted, my industry contacts informed me that Mark had suddenly requested an emergency meeting with both clients to pitch a premium tier service upgrade that would effectively double their monthly marketing retainers. He was trying to force his remaining clients to pay for his financial mistakes. It was the perfect opportunity for me to step in. I prepared 2 customized strategy pitches for Apex Logistics and Greenfield Organics. I didn't even have to offer them a discount. All I had to do was show them the truth. I reached out to their management teams and presented a comparative analysis of what they were currently paying Apex Marketing versus the actual market value of the services they were receiving. I showed them that Mark was charging them premium fees for basic, automated templates that required almost no manual labor from his team. I exposed the inflation in his invoices. Within 2 weeks, both clients requested a joint audit of their accounts with Apex Marketing. When Mark couldn't provide a transparent breakdown of where their budget was actually going, they did exactly what any smart business would do. They terminated their contracts for breach of transparency. And guess who was standing right there, ready to pick up the pieces? Vanguard Analytics. Within a matter of 45 days, Vanguard Analytics had successfully acquired all 3 of Apex Marketing's primary anchor clients. My corporate revenue went from 0 to over $80,000 a month. I moved out of Elena's living room and rented a beautiful modern office suite in the heart of the city's financial district. I hired 3 talented analysts who had recently been laid off by other firms, offering them competitive salaries and a healthy work environment. Meanwhile, Mark's empire was completely underwater. He couldn't pay the rent on his fancy downtown office. His staff, realizing that the company was going bankrupt, began quitting one by one. Jessica, the loyal assistant who had proudly told me that I was just a housewife holding him back, packed her bags and left him the moment his business credit cards started getting declined. She didn't love Mark. She loved his money. And now that the money was gone, she had absolutely no reason to stay. Mark was left entirely alone in an empty office, surrounded by unpaid bills, eviction notices, and the ruins of his own arrogance. The final act of this drama took place on a cold morning in November. I was sitting in my new corner office, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, looking out over the city skyline. My assistant knocked on the glass door. "Sarah, there's a man downstairs in the lobby demanding to see you," she said, looking a bit worried. "He claims he's your ex-husband. Security is holding him, but he's refusing to leave until he speaks with you." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "It's all right, send him up, but tell security to stay right outside the door." A few minutes later, the door opened and Mark walked in. If I hadn't known it was him, I might not have recognized him. The man who stood before me looked 10 years older than the man who had left me on that Tuesday afternoon. His expensive designer suit was wrinkled and unpressed. His hair was messy, and there were dark, heavy bags under his eyes. He looked completely broken, defeated, and hollow. He stood in the center of my beautiful office, looking around at the modern furniture, the bustling employees outside the glass, and the undeniable success of Vanguard Analytics. "So it really was you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You took everything from me." "I didn't take anything from you, Mark," I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. "Your clients left because you were lazy and dishonest. I simply offered them a better alternative. That's just business, isn't it? Isn't that exactly what you told me when you left me?" "You broke me, Sarah," he shouted, taking a step forward before noticing the security guard shifting at the door. He stopped, his shoulders slumping. "I lost the company. I had to file for corporate bankruptcy yesterday. The bank repossessed the penthouse. I'm living in a cheap motel outside the city. I have absolutely nothing left." "How poetic," I murmured. "A cheap motel and nothing left. That sounds incredibly familiar. Tell me, Mark, did you leave yourself $50 in your account? Or was it even less than that?" He looked down at the floor, tears of anger and humiliation welling up in his eyes. "You planned this. From the very moment I walked out that door, you planned to destroy me." "No," I corrected him, standing up from my desk and walking over to stand directly in front of him. "I didn't plan to destroy you. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided that honesty, loyalty, and human decency didn't matter. You thought you could use people, exploit their love and trust, and then discard them when you were done. You thought money made you untouchable." I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a single crisp $50 bill. I walked over and slipped it into the front pocket of his wrinkled suit jacket. "Consider it a parting gift," I said softly, mirroring the exact words he had used against me. "Now, please get out of my office. I have a business to run." Mark stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, completely speechless. The realization of what he had done, and the absolute perfection of the poetic justice he had just received, completely crushed whatever remaining pride he had left. He turned around, his head bowed, and walked out the door. As I watched him leave, I didn't feel a surge of malicious joy. I didn't laugh. I just felt an incredible, overwhelming sense of peace. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for months was finally gone. I was free. When people hear my story, they often think it's a story about revenge. They think the moral of the story is that you should never cross a woman who knows how to use data. But they're wrong. This isn't a story about revenge. This is a story about value. Mark thought my value came from the assets registered in his name. He thought that by taking away the house, the savings account, and the business title, he was taking away my power. He failed to realize that the money, the house, and the company weren't the source of my success. They were just the byproduct of my mind, my hard work, and my intelligence. You can steal someone's money. You can steal their house. You can even try to steal their dignity. But you can never steal their talent, their resilience, or their brilliance. The things that make you truly powerful are inside you, and no betrayer, no matter how clever or calculated they think they are, can ever strip that away from you. Today, Vanguard Analytics is one of the top-rated firms in the state. I am surrounded by people who respect me, partners who value honesty, and a community built on trust. I rebuilt my life from the absolute dust, not by sinking to Mark's level of deceit, but by standing tall in my own competence. To anyone out there who is currently sitting on a cold kitchen floor, weeping over a betrayal that feels like death, listen to me very carefully. Do not let their cruelty become your definition. They didn't destroy you. They just cleared the field so you can build something bigger, stronger, and more beautiful than before. Let them think they left you with nothing. Let them celebrate their temporary victory. Keep your head down, focus on your strength, and remember, the best revenge isn't a loud argument or a bitter fight. The best revenge is standing so high above them that you can no longer even see them looking up.